So welcome everybody. Welcome to Benko's webinar. We're super excited to have you. I'm really excited about our guest and I can't wait. I know, Steve, I was going to ask you a little bit, Dr. Gurr, we're really super excited about having him on, and you wanted to share a little bit about how you use him with your company. You want to go ahead and do that for me real fast?
Sure. Pleasure to be here, Kay. Nice to see you, Chuck. We have found through our coaching that having the clinical skills, the management skills are great. But what makes practices very successful is when they also have the soft skills, how to relate to one another, communication skills, and dealing with our patients when they have fear, anxiety, and phobia. Well, we've hit a different time right now that in our conversations with our clients, and I'm sure you've had the same, Kay, that many of our doctors now are going through a period of anxiety over what's going on with COVID and quite nervous about what's going to happen when we can get back to our offices and dealing with patients who have the same feelings. So we thought it would be a great time to introduce Dr. Gurr to all of you and your clients and see what he adds in the way of the soft skills to try to help him overcome some of the anxiety that's associated and ultimately depression that's associated with the current crisis.
Steve, I will say this. The one thing that I love about us is that we work together. We both do the same type of business, but yet we're here for each other and we support each other. So I know when I called you and said, hey, I really want to help, because it's not just dentists, it can be your team members. Everyone can suffer from depression, and it's almost, people get embarrassed by it. So I really want to thank you for allowing us to get Dr. Gurr on with us, and for you and Kelly coming on with us. I'm really excited about that. Before we get started, I always like for Chuck to give us a little update on supplies and how supplies are going, because that also can cause anxiety and depression, because people are concerned, like, am I going to be able to go practice? And if I am I going to have the supplies? So Chuck, I'm going to turn it over to you to give us a little update on that, please.
Kay, thank you very much. So my name is Chuck Cohen. I'm one of the two managing directors of Benko Dental. And the number one question we've been getting asked lately is, tell us about PPE, personal protective equipment. Will we have what we need to practice dentistry? And the good news is we are seeing every sign across the country and within the supply chain that the supply chain is filling in. We've already gotten our first shipments of N95 masks. Our friends at 3M have risen to the occasion and are making tons and tons of new masks. The use by the healthcare providers at the front lines of the COVID-19 crisis seems to be going down a little bit. So we are very confident that we will have the products that dentists need to go back and practice when dentistry reopens sometime in May. At least that's our fingers crossed answer. Whether it's Shine, Benko, Patterson, or your preferred supplier, we definitely recommend buying from a trusted source. There's a lot of counterfeit products out there. Trusted sources will make sure that there's no price gouging. They will make sure that what you get is what you order and the quality is there and the regulations are met. So, Kay, thank you very much for asking me to help, and looking forward to getting dentistry reopened in a few weeks.
You're welcome. And I know that we're eventually going to have a webinar with Melissa and talking about, the air quality and what we have to do for that. So I'm also excited about that. The one thing I will say, Chuck, is that you've done an amazing job in keeping everyone up to date, and you stayed on top of everything. How you do it, I don't know. You just totally amaze me. But guys, before we get started, I just need to go over some information about your CEs, because it's really important that we give you your CEs, but we have to make sure that we also follow the guidelines. So number one, I will say this. If you're watching the webinar on a cell phone, that's okay. However, what we need you to do is we need you to email me your phone number and your name so we can cross-reference it. Somehow when you sign on with a cell phone, it doesn't give us your name. So send your name and your cell phone number to practicecoaching@benko.com. Again, that's practicecoaching@benko.com, and we will make sure that you get your CEs. The other thing is that when you registered for the webinar, please make sure that you use your legal name, what's ever on your license, because when we send you your certification, we're going to put the name on there that you registered in. And in order to be able to get your CEs for it, it has to be the same as on your license. The other thing is that if you're logging in and you're watching it with someone, it won't work. Make sure that you log in on your own device. We must know that you logged in, because the logged in is time stamped. And with that being said, if you log in and you log off before the hour is up, we will not be able to give you your CEs. You have to watch the entire thing in order to be able to receive your CEs, which I'm sure you will. It's going to be a great webinar today. So I'm really excited about that. After the course, you will receive a survey. With that survey, we'd like for you to give us any kind of feedback, anything that you want to know more about. We're here to help you at Benko, so please let us know. We want to make sure that we answer all your questions and that we are there for you as your best friend. So please help us do that. Also, at the very bottom, you'll notice there's a Q&A. So Steve and Kelly are going to be helping us do the Q&A. So all you need to do is type your questions right there, and then we will break during the session. You can also check, there's a little box that says anonymously, because we want to make sure everyone's comfortable in asking the questions that you need to take care of yourself. So please make sure that you check the anonymous box, and we won't know who it's coming from, and Dr. Gurr will be able to answer your questions. He will also give you his private email address at the end, so you'll be able to send out messages directly to him. So I'm super excited with that. So with all that being said, one last thing is that we are going to be doing something fun. We're also going to ask you during this webinar, post some pictures, take some pictures of yourself, and we want you to post them on your Facebook page, and we want you to share it with us so that we can actually share it. We may do some kind of competition, and I challenge all my Benko co-workers and all of our customers, please take some pictures, and what you're going to do is you're going to share them with @benko.com, and we will make sure that we get those on. We'll also tell you that at the end too. So with all of that being said, I would like to say I am super honored to introduce the managing director of Benko, which I get to call boss. And I think he's probably one of the smartest men that I know. He gets things done, and that's what I think I like about him, because I'm a get her done kind of person, and if you tell Chuck anything, he makes it happen, and that's what I love about him. So he's a great leader, and he is going to be introducing our host speakers for today. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Chuck Cohen.
Okay, thank you very much. I love your introductions. They make me feel so good about myself. I almost don't recognize who you're talking about. Thank you very much for introducing me. And we are all lucky at Benko to have Kay working on all of our behalf. So thank you very much. So today is our 10th Coping with COVID-19, Coping with Crisis webinar. Thank you very much for joining us today. We are really, really blessed to have Dr. Katz, Kelly Fox Valvagni, and Dr. Howard Gurr as our panelists today, mostly Dr. Gurr. In some ways, in many ways, this is going to be the most important topic that we talk about. So far in our programs, we've been talking about money, the PPP program, how to make sure your team is taken care of, HR issues. Today, we're going to be talking about what goes on between the ears of our practitioners, our team members, and our patients. And I think no one would disagree to say that the last few weeks have been traumatic as a country, as a society, as dental practitioners, and as individuals. We are truly blessed to be able to hear today from Dr. Howard Gurr, who is a mental health professional, and he's going to walk us through some of his ideas for how we can deal with potential anxiety and depression that's associated with the COVID-19 crisis. Dr. Gurr, thank you very much for being here today. Dr. Katz and Kelly, thank you for hosting, and we look forward to hearing the message. So please carry on.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel a little bit like I should be, blushing now too. But here's my game plan for today. My approach is to kind of teach you how psychologists think and understand what anxiety and depression is, so we get an idea of really what we're dealing with. And then after that, we'll talk about ways to reduce it, control it, and handle it so that it doesn't interfere with our lives that significantly. Now, most people don't understand, I think, that anxiety actually is a necessity. It's built into our biology. It is stuck kind of in what we call the amygdala, or the old primitive part of the brain. So anxiety is actually something we all walk around with. And anxiety does have its good components, because without anxiety, we really would probably not do anything. So anxiety motivates us. However, when we have too much anxiety, it kind of cripples us. And physiologically speaking, we're kind of designed for very short bursts of anxiety, 10, 15 minutes of anxiety. Of course, we don't live that kind of lifestyle. And under the current circumstances, we have just chronic anxiety. And so our bodies don't get a chance to recoup. Now, we psychologists divide anxiety kind of into like three components. There are fears, which are anxiety reactions that the body gets into this defensive mode in the case of a real threat. Then we have phobias, where the body does exactly the same thing. It prepares for battle, but it might be responding to something truly that is not really threatening. So there are people out there who have fears of, let's say, snakes, which is kind of an instinctive thing, but they'll have the same physiological, emotional reaction if they see a snake on TV. Now, the snake on TV really can't hurt them, but it doesn't really matter. They'll still react the same way. So we have fears, phobias, and then we have anxieties. And anxieties are more vague and amorphous, like general anxiety. Now, normally we don't deal with them all at the same time, but we are now. So we have fears, and we have phobias, and we have anxieties all at the same time. We're not designed to handle that. We're not designed to handle that kind of information. I forgot to kind of scroll my screen here. So anxiety is natural, it's normal. We can't really get rid of it because we need it. And anxiety is protection, and it's protection across the board. And as a psychologist, what I look at people from one angle really, and that is, what is the behavior that they're eliciting, and what is it protecting them from? And I believe that all behavior protects us from some real or imagined threat. So we have anxieties, fears, and phobias that are not different. Now, some people are born with a predisposition to have more anxiety than others. And anxiety reactions tend to run in families. So if a grandmother or a great-grandmother or a great-grandfather, whatever, it doesn't really matter, has had anxiety problems, you might have a predisposition to have a higher anxiety reaction. So there was a theorist called Carl Jung, who was a disciple of Freud, who had the concept of the collective unconscious, which kind of didn't make sense on face value, because what he said was, in us is the history and knowledge of everyone who came before us. However, if you look at it from the perspective of DNA, he's right. And so you can have aspects of yourself that are inherited, because we're all kind of genetic roulette, that you got from somebody else generations behind you. We always say, oh, so-and-so looks like their uncle, or so-and-so, that sounds like their grandfather. Well, there are other personality and qualities that we also get, and anxiety happens to be one of them. So some people are predisposed to high levels of anxiety. Let me just see what the next one. All right, we'll stay on this one. So in my practice, I deal with a lot of people who have anxiety and phobias, and I see that they kind of do the same thing all the time. They tighten their bodies, they raise their shoulders, they don't breathe properly, they hyperventilate, and they don't even know they're hyperventilating. And these are the things that may make people more anxious. Also, coffee, chocolate, stimulants, sugars, these things make us more anxious as well. So if you're someone who is at some level of anxiety that's higher than others, avoid stimulants and caffeines, because it just makes things worse. Okay. In 1956, Hans Selye wrote this book called The Stress of Life. And he defined that stress has three phases: the activation stage, the resistance stage, and then the stage of exhaustion. And Hans came up with a theory that we're only designed for so much stress. And too much stress is going to yield us some physical, emotional problem within a year or so. And in 1967, these two guys came up with a scale. And in that scale, they divided all life issues into points. The theory was that if you had 300 more points on their scale, the next year you were going to have some health problem. And the body really doesn't know the difference, by the way, between good stress and bad stress. So on their scale, holidays and Christmas and vacations had points attached to them. Now, to give an idea about the dating of this scale, a mortgage over 10,000 had more points than a mortgage under 10,000. So give you an idea of how old this stuff and really where it came from. And in terms of the stress levels, so too much stress and too much anxiety is really unhealthy, both psychologically and physically. It causes damage. And one of the things it tends to cause is a reduction of our immunological system. So the more stressed we are, the less robust we are in fighting off even upper respiratory illnesses. So for example, in saliva, there's something called immunoglobulin A. And when we're happy and laughing, we have more immunoglobulin A than when we're sad or angry. And immunoglobulin A happens to be our first line defense against upper respiratory illnesses. So from just a physical standpoint, when we're happier, we're actually healthier and stronger. Okay, so now I'm going to give you a couple of my theories. I have my theory called the 9-volt theory of life. And essentially what this is every day you wake up and you have 9 volts. And the 9 volts should kind of be parceled out to 3 volts taking care of your body and health functions, and 3 volts to take care of your work or school related issues. And it's supposed to leave you 3 volts to enjoy the rest of the day. But stress is a volt drainer, and it eats up 4 volts all by itself. And that only leaves you 5. So you don't have the full range of voltage to take care of everything. So you kind of parcel it out. But really what happens is you have nothing left over for enjoyment or happiness in that day. Then we have what we call the Richard Nixon weak organ theory. Now, this theory was born out of the fact that when Watergate hit, Richard Nixon developed phlebitis. And the theory is that because of the undue stress on his system, the phlebitis was that bodily function was his weakest system, and it fell first. So the theory is that all of us have one biological system that's weaker than the others, and it's going to hit first. So for example, there are people out there who have back problems, neck problems, gastrointestinal difficulties, headaches, biological blood difficulties. My rosacea is breaking up more than normal, and I can't get rid of it. So I know my skin's my issue. So we all have one system that breaks down, and it's important to recognize what that system is. So when that system goes, you kind of know, all right, I'm overloaded. I need to pull back. I need to kind of like calm down so that the rest of the systems don't fail as well. As I said earlier, there's good stress and bad stress. The brain really doesn't know the difference between those two. Anything that stresses our brain causes a reaction. And so even when we're super happy about stuff, it does cause some stress on the system. And as I said earlier, stress is necessary. It motivates us. So we need a certain amount of stress and anxiety to get us to move. It's kind of like, the big joke is that anyone who's smoking pot as a criminal probably would not commit a crime because they'll say, I'll do it tomorrow. Because the pot is an amotivational drug. So the lack of motivation stops them from doing a crime. So on some levels for society, I guess it's good. Okay. All right. Now, what really causes stress? It's not necessarily what's happening on the outside that's causing us stress. It's how we view it. It's our interpretation. And that's why different people have different reactions to stress. It's how they perceive the situation. So my training is that as a CBT therapist or cognitive behavioral therapist, it's thoughts that cause feelings, feelings cause behavior. Now, I'm going to do this, I normally do this face-to-face, but I'm going to do this exercise to get you to understand how this works. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to use your imagination and imagine that you're the last one to get on an elevator, and it's an elevator ride that may take a long time. If you've been And if you haven't been in an elevator, that's a 2-minute elevator ride. Just imagine you're on one. So imagine you're the last one to get on the elevator and the door closes on your face and you're packed in this elevator like a sardine and you can't really go anywhere or do anything. Now, the entire time you're on this elevator, you're getting hit in the back of the leg with what appears to be a stick over and over and over again. Really annoying, but you don't want to make a big fuss. You don't make a big deal about it, but you're really annoyed. And maybe you figure when the door opens up, because you're the first one to get out, that you're going to turn around, spin around, and stare this person down. Okay? So finally, the doors open up, you take your step out, you spin around, you stare at this person, and you realize that this person is a blind old woman with a cane. All right? Think about that. Are you less annoyed and upset once you realize maybe she couldn't have helped it? Most people would say, well, I kind of let it go at that point because I'm not annoyed. I thought maybe it was some annoying kid with a stick, but it turns out she really couldn't help it. It takes a 40th of a second for that thought and that emotional change to occur. And so you still were hit by that stick in your imagination anyway, for 2 minutes. But by perceiving it as someone who couldn't help it, you change the emotional reaction. And it's important to hold on to that little exercise because that is like the symbolic representation about how thoughts cause feelings and then feelings cause actions. So by the way we perceive things, it determines essentially how we react. Now, there are a couple of things that people do to make things kind of worse. So I have black and white thinking up there. And black and white thinking is thinking in extremes, so to speak. It's either all or nothing. And that's not the way the world or life really works. Life is really shades of gray. But if you think of everything as all or nothing, it's either great or it stinks. It's horrible or it's good, but nothing lasts too long. And what happens is generally it's too much horrible. I think it was Woody Allen who was asked what kind of people there are in the world. And he said, there's only 2 types, the horrible and the terrible. And he said the horrible were people who had some kind of deformities and everybody else was just terrible. In any case, whether you like him or not, that's just a reference. So black and white thinking is something that gets us in trouble. Catastrophizing is when we just kind of think the worst case scenario all the time. Oh, this is going to be terrible. This is going to be the worst thing. But when we have people who catastrophize, in a sense, in therapy, we actually, as a clinician, what we do is we make them catastrophize even worse. So for example, I would have someone say, oh, this is horrible, I'm going to be embarrassed. And I say, okay, now you're going to be embarrassed. Let's take it to the next step. What happens? Oh, well, this is going to happen. Okay, and what's going to happen after that? And I keep going and pushing them to the point where it gets so ridiculous that they kind of like lose it. And they lose that being upset because it's ridiculous. So sometimes we just force people to catastrophize even more than they wanted to. And then, of course, ruminating, just constantly thinking over and over and over again about a problem. It doesn't really make it any better, but we tend to spend too much time worrying about stuff. And then the last one on my list here is emotionally charged vocabulary. Now, you people have already been trained in this area. You just don't know it. So what happens is when someone in their head says, oh, this is terrible or horrible, or this is the worst thing, or this is killing me, we have a stronger emotional reaction. All right. You've learned that if you tell your patients before you give them a Novocaine shot or something that's is going to hurt, you don't say, hold on to your chair, this is going to hurt. You say something like, oh, there's going to be a slight pinch, a little discomfort. You distract them a bit. You make them not think about it. And when they're not thinking about it, or they're distracted, or they're using non-emotionally charged vocabulary in their heads, it doesn't really hurt as much. So when people are upset, they think about things in too strong words, and the idea is to reduce that as much as possible. All right. Before I go any further, I know I threw a lot at you. Does anyone have questions that they want to ask? Nope.
Steve, do you have any questions that you want to come up with and ask the doctor? Unmute your mic for me.
One of the things that comes to mind, Dr. Gurr, is how do we avoid letting our stress rub off on others and vice versa, of having their stress enhance and increase the amount of stress that we're feeling?
Well, again, you know, the issue for me is the control and predictability and limiting the discomfort, but it goes on the idea that in terms of your question, there's a lot of I guess misinformation and anxiety and paranoia and a lot of stuff out there that people are transmitting and communicating because they really don't have answers. And so if we allow that information to set us off a path that we've set up for ourselves, you know, change our trajectory, we're letting information that really isn't useful overwhelm us. And so it's important, I think, to kind of keep everything in perspective and not let other people's anxiety invade your own. And again, vice versa. So it's recognizing our thoughts and feelings and not letting other people's thoughts and feelings send us into a tailspin, so to speak. I think that's
what's your thought? What's your thought about, instead of thinking about how it's affecting us, thinking about what we can do to overcome it, what our action plan can be moving forward, and trying to focus on that to avoid thinking about all the horrible things that have been filling our heads over the last couple of weeks?
Well, that's kind of like in the second half of my presentation, so I'll get to that, things that we can do. I just wanted people to understand, you know, what the basic core issue is in terms of anxiety and how we think about things, and how by thinking things differently, we can change our emotional reactions. So it's kind of like this is the basis for, I think, the knowledge that people have to understand what's going on and what's happening to them. You know, it's not that we're powerless here, but I think when we don't know what's happening or why things are happening, I think we then don't have a sense of being in control. And I think that understanding that anxiety and stress, because they're synonymous in this particular situation, are, as I said, natural responses to perceived threats. And interestingly enough, if you look at the biological history of laughter, if you go back a million years, when we were threatened by some horrible situation as a community, and we survived, that's when we laughed. And so laughter was this release of tension and stress. Again, biologically, you know, I guess from my perspective, what I'm saying is that as sophisticated as we'd like to believe we are, we still are driven by biological functions that are millions of years old. We've just gotten a little bit more sophisticated somehow, but we're still driven by the same forces that drove us millions of years ago. And you can go into all sorts of aspects of life, but which are not necessarily appropriate to this particular conversation. But we're not that smart and we're not that sophisticated. We do things that are biologically driven. But if we know that we do things that are biologically driven and we understand that, and we understand why we do things, I think we have more control and power. I don't know if that answers your question. But as I said, Steve, I'll go into like things that we can do. So I kind of hit the anxiety piece, and I just want to go into the depression piece.
Can we ask her one more question? Would that be all right, Dr. Gurr? Could Kelly ask you one more question? We have some more
Absolutely.
questions that came in. Guys, and keep sending your questions in. We are going to try to answer them. We're keeping them anonymous. So just make sure you check the anonymous on box on the question. But go ahead, Kelly.
So a bunch of questions are coming in. It's really great. We appreciate everyone sharing and asking. This one is, so what about having anxiety of actually going back to work and possibly being exposed to the virus 8 hours a day? I think that's a reasonable fear.
Yeah. Well, that's why I said in reality, this is a situation that's been kind of odd for us because most people do not have the fears, the anxieties, and the phobias at the same time. And so there is reality to the anxiety about going back to work and being exposed. That's a real threat. And so, again, I think from my point of view, control has always been our best friend, so to speak. And control, or the sense of control, tends to reduce anxiety. If you even think from a parenting perspective, parents yell at kids when they feel like they're out of control, or the kid has more control than the parent. So it's this concept of being in control. So in terms of going back to work, I think that the hope is that when we do go back to work, there's enough PPE and enough knowledge base so that we could prepare ourselves and protect ourselves from any kind of infection from the virus.
Great answer. Thank you, Dr. Gurr. I agree with that. I think that people need to feel like they have some control now. So I think that's something that's definitely doable. You want to do one more, Kay, or you want to pick them back up in a few minutes?
Dr. Gurr, you okay with one more question?
Throw them. Go ahead.
Okay, so, and a lot of these are very closely related because I think we all have COVID-19 on the mind right now. This is from another doctor that writes, when we eventually get back to work, how do we handle our team's fears and feelings and not let those feelings influence our patients?
Well, again, I think, and I was going to get to that a little bit later, but I think the knowledge of how to control the environment in the dental office so that we are safe as providers and we keep ourselves as viral free as possible in all circumstances is the way to reduce the team's anxiety as well. So I think from my perspective, I'm not a dentist, so take it for what it's worth, but I think practices across the board are going to have to make some changes in terms of how they deal with patients. But it's not just dentists. I think every one of us is going to have to make changes. My practice is I do virtual reality therapy, and I have people wear head-mounted displays to get them immersed in a virtual environment. Well, that's not happening now. And when it does kick up again, I'm going to have to do things like, besides just using alcohol wipes, I bought UVC machines to be able to disinfect the head-mounted displays. So, and I'm going to do that right in front of my patients. So they'll see that the head-mounted display is now being disinfected right in front of them. So I think that there are practices and procedures that are probably going to have to change. And I think that in life, this particular experience is going to change lots of aspects of our lives because we've never had an event like this that has been so broad and so out of control and so we're unprepared. I think it was Mike Tyson who said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And
it's kind of the whole world right now.
Exactly.
So Howie, what will we see in our patients in the way of demands and belligerence that will really be displays of their fear and anxiety?
Well, you're right. That's exactly what's going to happen. Some patients are going to be more irritated and difficult, but that's really an expression of their anxiety. If you look at all of your patients' behaviors from the perspective, I don't care what it is, it's their method of protecting themselves from the perceived threat that they experience, then you won't get as irritated and annoyed because they're completely doing what they think they need to do to make themselves safe. And of course, we have a range of behaviors that make us feel safe. You know, extending, let's say, some people will do everything and anything for everybody, be nice to everybody else in the world, hoping that if I'm nice to everybody in the world, then I'm safe. No one's going to be angry at me. No one's going to be difficult with me. And then you have the other end of the extreme, where people are just difficult and nasty, but that's because they're keeping people at a distance as well, just a different approach. So,
Dr. Gurr, can I chime in and just put that in a little bit of a dental practice context for our audience?
Mm-hmm.
So for everybody listening, we all know about patients, even, you know, pre-COVID-19, that they are sweet as pie to our administrative team, but as soon as they get into the clinical space, they turn into a totally different person, or vice versa. That is usually not really who that person is. That is usually their response to their fear, phobia, or anxiety. And so we're going to see that at a heightened level now, is my prediction, when we come back into our practices, because people have so much more on their mind and on their plate. So we need to be mindful of that and not take it personally and not hold it against the patient.
mm-hmm.
Everyone is going to respond and react differently, and we have to be the professionals in the situation.
Exactly.
Great job. Go ahead with your PowerPoint. Thank you for answering those.
Okay, so depression, which is the second part of this emotional reaction to what's going on. And we're seeing that, I mean, you can see it at home, where people are just, you know, doing all sorts of things that they normally wouldn't do, or they're irritable, they're angry, they're upset, you know, being locked up in a house for a long period of time. You're starting to see things and qualities that you probably didn't know were there or don't want to see. And so people are getting somewhat depressed. And there are two kinds of depression, simplistically speaking. There's the internalizing depression, where people turn anger and frustration and helplessness into themselves and kind of withdraw and just pull in, and they're difficult to deal with or communicate with. And then there's the opposite side of that. And those are the people who are irritated and nasty and horrible and blast their depression out at everybody else. So you see people like that all the time. And, you know, like I've been in restaurants where people were just nasty to waitresses and wait staff. And I look at them and I think, that's a depressed person who's just blasting people who really don't deserve it. And so we get to see that whole range of behaviors. Now, the hallmark of depression is what I put up there: hopelessness and helplessness. And unfortunately, we have a lot of that, because people are feeling helpless in the situation of dealing with COVID-19. And they're also feeling hopeless, like this is never going to end. We're never going to get out of this. Life is never going to be the same. So those are the two core cognitive pieces that are going on in depression. And of course, we have, you know, eating and sleeping issues, where people are either eating too much or eating not enough, or sleeping too much or not sleeping enough. So those things set us off. Now, if we're not eating correctly, it's going to affect our mood. And if we're not sleeping correctly, it is also going to affect our mood. So physically speaking, we can get away with certain sleep deprivation, but we can't get away with losing REM sleep. And sleep has like a 4-stage cycle. So it's 1, 2, REM, and then 4. And we kind of like rotate in this cycle every 90 minutes to 2 hours. Like if you ever watched old, you know, prisoner of war movies, they would turn on sirens and flashlights in the middle of the night to wake up the prisoners. But that was only designed to ruin their REM sleep, because if you keep doing that to people, eventually you break them down. So eating and sleeping is a problem. And of course, activities of work are disrupted. And then we have social disconnection and loneliness, because we're all in our little kind of worlds. And that creates a sense of depression and loss. Meaningfulness. I have loss of meaning. You know, when you're working, if you think about it, work provides meaningfulness in our lives. And so there are 4 major components to life, from my perspective. So we have sleep, and then we have your family life, your social life, and your work life. If your sleep is off, that's not great. And if family life is a problem and your social life is not there, and you hate your job, you're in a pickle. You're in a real problem. But if you have a couple of them that are okay, like you love your job, you love your family, maybe your social life is okay, you're not sleeping, at least 2 out of 4 are okay, you're better off. But when too many things are off, and we have too many things are off, people are isolated, people aren't socializing, people aren't working, and so, and family life may be a little bit more stressed. It's a difficult scenario for most people. So that's a problem. Ruminating, as I discussed before, when we just constantly think and ruminate about these problems, it makes us have a problem. And then of course there's punishing ourselves and self-blaming. And this is again a cognition, a piece of the thinking that gets us in trouble. So that's a depressive piece. So we have the anxiety and depression. Now, what happens many times is there's a kind of cycle. And so you get anxious, and then you get depressed because you're anxious, and then you get anxious because you're depressed, and it just keeps going in a loop. And that kind of spirals out of control. We have to break the loop. So there are things that we have to do that will stop this spinning out of control. All right. Let's get to the next one. Okay. Now, here are the things we can do. I don't know if there's any more questions.
There was one question that came up. Do you feel there may be increased incidences of emergencies once people return to the offices due to that increase in anxiety?
Emergencies, patients calling for emergencies or real emergencies?
Both.
I would think that they're probably going to be real emergencies.
In other words, patients have probably put off their treatment because of the fear of coming in, and now all of a sudden when we reopen, will there be more emergencies that are coming in? I think that we're going to have to, and Kelly, you can probably bounce on this too, we're going to have to really control our appointment book to make sure we can get all these people in that need to come back in and see us that we haven't been able to see, because there was certain guidelines in place, Steve, what we could do as an emergency, right? What was classified as true emergency?
Sure, but I think it's also going to bring up the need to do better triage in determining what are true emergencies and what are not. Phone skills, screening, instruction of your teams on how to handle the various types of emergencies. All of these are going to be necessary skills that we can work on now with our teams virtually, so that we're ready when the time comes to implement.
Absolutely.
Right, I agree. So here's another one of my favorite quotes. It's tough to make predictions, especially about the future. Yogi Berra has a whole bunch of wise statements he's made, but we don't know what the future is going to bring, and I think that we do have to prepare. But while we're in the current situation, there are things I kind of recommend that people do. So don't re-traumatize yourself by watching TV, listening to horror stories, and catching the news 24 hours a day, and listening to all these stories that are horrible and terrible, but that's kind of the way the news is these days. What's it saying? Something like, I think, fire stories sell, something like that. They don't want to put good news on there because people don't watch it. So, horror stories make people watch. If you're going to watch, I suggest watching an hour a day, and that's it. Limit it so that you don't sit there and listen to the same stories over and over and over again. Educate yourself on what is known. Read real literature if you can, as opposed to politicized literature. We know that having a positive outlook and spirituality does physically help us. And so by having positive outlooks and some spirituality in yourself, doesn't really matter what it is, can make your body actually work better. The cognitive restructuring we talked about before, changing that internal dialogue. Maintaining routines and structure is important. We have a tendency to kind of get too loose, too loose, and we don't follow procedures and practices that we normally do in regular life. But what we do know is when you do follow routines, you're actually better off. When you have a day planner and you plan on things, you actually feel in control. And that makes the day manageable and meaningful. Okay, so you see a lot of stuff about meditation and mindfulness and how that helps the body. And it does. I will tell you though, I have very little patience for it. So I tend to always find the shortcut to get to the same spot that they are. And what I found is very slow diaphragmatic breathing helps. And how that works is you breathe in through the nose at a count of 4, and then you hold it for a little bit, and then you breathe out a count of 4. I think it's Dr. Weil has he calls it the 4-7-8 breathing. It's 4 in, hold it to count of 7, and let it go, count at 8. Now, the reason that's important is because there's a carbon dioxide oxygen balance in our brain. It's like a little switch. And when the oxygen and carbon dioxide is off, the brain thinks you're in trouble. It kicks in the sympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system is the one, it sounds great, but it actually makes us more anxious. That's the one that defends us and protects us, but it creates more problems. By using this diaphragmatic breathing, it introduces the parasympathetic nervous system, which slows everything down. There's also something called heart rate variability, and you could buy like little finger, like the oxygen measure. You could buy a heart rate variability one, and if your heart rate variability number is high, your parasympathetic system is predominant, and if it's low, your sympathetic is predominant. So the whole idea is to get the vagus nerve to like just, be quiet. All right. Now, in terms of staff, I'm going to always go into the assumption that even if you let go of your staff at this point, you're going to rehire them when everything kicks in. And so your staff is very important. And you want to keep your staff, then you have to treat your staff like they're important people and they count. Where is it? I have a, oh, here it is. A Limeade employee care report found, just as an aside, that 1 in 3 employees have left the job because they didn't feel the employer cared about them as a person. 25% left the job because they weren't treated with dignity by the company leaders. And 1 in 5 left the job because their employer didn't support their well-being. So it's important to treat your staff and make them feel like they still belong, even if they're isolated at this point, and that their ideas and thoughts matter. Because your staff may come up with ideas that you may not have come up with.
Even during this period that our offices are closed,
Mm-hmm.
Just as we've told offices that they should be calling their patients constantly, just to let them know that they care and to check in on them.
Right.
We should be checking in with our team members constantly and making sure they're okay, or scheduling virtual team performance reviews and being very, very positive and giving them hope and letting them know that we find their input very valuable to helping us make the right decisions.
Correct. Right. I think at this point, rather than not being active, you should be more active, reaching out to your clients and your staff and being more involved than you were even before. Because it's important, because people are socially isolated and disconnected, and everyone's dealing with this anxiety, and you have to make them feel as the leader of the organization. If you're a dentist, it comes from the top down. And when you communicate the importance of people and the sympathy and understanding, that gets trickled down to everybody in your staff. And it's extremely important. And it ultimately gets trickled down to your clients. So it's important to keep that involved and that involvement with your staff. Something called survivor guilt. So most people see it as people who survived some trauma and are guilty that they survived and other people didn't. Well, it works the same place in the office, in that people who are left, let's say you have a skeleton staff and you're only doing what you need to do to get through until the time comes that you can open up again. The people who are left are actually more anxious and guilt-ridden because of the feeling of, well, I shouldn't be here, or why am I here and other people are not here. And so they feel bad about that. And they're not going to talk about it because it seems like, you know, an alien concept that no one should be talking about. But I'm suggesting bring it up, discuss it, talk about it with them, get it out in the open and get rid of it, okay? Because I'm guaranteeing you, people who are still working have this survivor guilt. Also, be transparent about your needs and issues so that you're human and they have that sense that you're also traumatized and having difficulty, but you're gonna, you know, grapple and handle it just like everyone else has to. Okay. So here's a couple of more things. Encourage workers to work on developing a sense of purpose in life. I do a lot of therapy on the phone and video, and I keep pushing my clients to find something that they normally wouldn't have done, or they've always said stuff like, oh, I don't have time to do that. So now you have time. And I think that people should find the purpose in life because it makes us healthier. It's the same concern I have when people retire young and they have no meaningful purpose. They don't do well physically. So even in retirement, I always say, you know, you need to have something that's meaningful in your life. As we said, connect with clients, reach out to them regularly, exercise, get physical in the face of anxiety. So for example, you know, as a complete odd thing, counterintuitively, when people get anxious, what's happening is the body is actually preparing for some kind of physical exertion, either a fight or flight, and that's what we call it, a fight or flight syndrome. And what most people do when they get anxious is they stop and do nothing. Well, of course, that's not what the body actually needs to do when it's anxious. It actually needs to physically do something. So go take a run, go do something physically, burn out that adrenaline the right way so that your body gets into that rhythm of understanding how to use it the right way, and you physically and psychologically understand how to get your body to do things so you don't get crippled by anxiety, all right? So that's why when people say, I have an anxiety problem, I think I'm gonna pass out, I think I'm gonna have a heart attack, I'm gonna die, I'm going crazy. Well, psychologically and physically, none of that should happen because the anxiety reaction is actually designed to protect you in emergency. It wouldn't really be smart for us to pass out in the case of an emergency. So that never really happens. So physically burn out the anxiety. Again, mindfulness, if you have the patience. There are mindful apps that you can use. There's one on the internet. No, it's an app called Headspace, where you could just download Headspace and use it every day to kind of like calm yourself down. There are others, but I kind of recommend Headspace. Meaningful activities. Do things that will improve your practice now. Now you have lots of patience and time. These are the moments where you should be thinking, how can I improve my practice when I reopen? What things can I do to make my practice better so that when I do reopen, I've covered the things that I really need to cover to improve my financial or medical procedures, whatever it is.
Just want to give you a little list there of, and this is just bullet points really, expanding your knowledge, taking as much online CE. There are tons of webinars, both clinical, management-wise. Clarifying responsibilities of a team, putting together a manual that outlines responsibilities out and defines procedures and tasks that are going on in your office. Work on an HR manual to go through the guidelines and the policies of your practice, especially important at this time. Resetting your goals, working on verbal skills, refining your systems so that when you get back, you can function at a higher level. For those offices that are not paperless, well, shame on you at this point now, because that's probably one of the biggest sources of cross-contamination. Let's get your gear going so that you can start to become paperless. Working on developing your software skills for you and your team. Developing digital content to promote your office, promote your practice. All of these are things that you can work on that we normally don't have the time in the course of our regular work days.
So that's the dental side. It's not the psychological side. Okay. Here's another one. We make a million decisions every day. Some of them are really just not that important. How many bites am I going to take of the sandwich? It really doesn't matter too much. But there are decisions that I think are very significant. And I always say to myself, if I make this decision, will I regret it? Or if I don't make this decision, will I regret it? And so there are decisions that I think are significant in terms of your life, your practice, your relationships, that if you say to yourself, well, if I don't do this, there's a good chance down the road I might regret this, then don't make that decision, okay? Because you're adding another problem. And laughter. I saved it for the end, but we know that laughter, physically speaking, actually makes us healthier. As I said before, in terms of IgA, also pain management, laughter reduces pain sensations, and it also makes the body healthier. So I always suggest that people watch comedies, do things that are fun, increase laughter in your day. We know, by the way, that kids laugh about 100 times a day, and we laugh as adults about 4 to 5 times a day. And so we have to increase laughter because healthy-wise, it improves us, and it also will make us more resistant to illnesses, and makes the day go better. So binge watch some kind of comedy or watch comedy movies. Don't watch, I don't understand why, like in the first week of this, there were all these viral terror movies going on TV. It just made no sense to me. So watch things that are light and humorous, and make every day a happy day if you can. Okay.
Dr. Gurr, while you've never treated me directly, you have indirectly just touch on our old routine of joke battles.
Oh, that. Well, Steve and I have known each other a long time. And in those days when we had memories, Steve and I would do what's known as a joke war. And what would happen is someone would have to tell a joke, and the person would have to tell a joke that's related to the first joke in some topic or theme. And then the next person had to tell a joke that was connected to the other person's joke in theme or topic. And Steve and I, we were capable of doing this for 3 or 4 hours. And it got to the point probably where we weren't even telling the jokes anymore. We would just tell the punchline because the other person obviously knew that joke. And so it was thousands and thousands of jokes that we used to do this with. And it got to the point where we'd be at a party and everyone else would be stopping and just listening to us. And so that was an amazing time, as I said, when I had a good memory. Now I don't seem to be able to hold on to those jokes as well. But I think it was an extremely entertaining period for us and an entertaining period for people who listened to us. So.
And it avoided us getting depressed.
Sounds like a fun activity that people could do now to try to get laughter going.
You could. Yeah.
What a fun thing that people could be doing via Skype or Zoom or a conference like this with their friends and their family that they can't be with in person right now.
Right. It is a possibility, and there's enough resources to get jokes. But the idea is unfortunately, is to wear the person down.
So Kelly, I just think we need to record your laughter because you've got the best laughter. You have the best laugh in the entire world. You could just make everybody laugh just by listening to you. So wait, now on that slide, did everyone see that last slide that was up? I want to make sure that you saw it. Can we bring that up for one more second? Can you share your screen one more time?
Someone who's.
I think.
Can you say it again?
There, okay, the very last one. Go to your very last slide. There you go. So guys, you want to just talk a little bit about this last slide? You can go all the way down right there. Why don't you were going to talk a little bit about this last slide, and I want to make sure that we get this out to people, because our biggest thing that we want to do right now is that, you know, no matter what, it is important that if you're having any kind of problems or if you're feeling stressed, and, you know, it's easy to do. I mean, I have a granddaughter here and she's home from school, and my husband, I'm used to traveling. It's a lot. So if you have some feelings that you just need to talk to someone, you want to share what you were going to say about this last slide?
Yeah, there are, you know, when people are overwhelmed and a lot of anxiety and depression, it's really important to be able to handle that with a professional. And there are regional psychological associations. I don't know them all, obviously, but, you know, every county or every state has a regional psychological association, and all of them have Find a Psychologist on there. And these are licensed psychologists in your state. Now, there are other mental health professionals out there. There are social workers and mental health counselors and you know, lay clinicians and all sorts of things. But psychologist is a protected title, and someone can only be a psychologist in a state if they have a PhD and have passed the licensing exam. So I know for sure that psychological associations have members who are credentialed. There are other resources out there I don't know, but these are the ones I recommend. So the American Psychological Association has a crisis center where you can find people wherever you are in the United States or Canada, I think. And again, the regional associations. And I put up the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline just because I think everyone should have it anyway. And there's my email address if someone wants to, you know, ask a question or look for a reference or referral in their area, if I can help them out. So
thank you so much. So that's really good, guys. So if you feel like you want to reach out and just ask a question, he's offering to help. So please feel comfortable in doing that. And he's not going to share any of that information with myself, Steve, or Kelly, or anybody at Benko. It's just going to be something he does himself, that he's actually volunteering to do. So we really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Gurr.
thank you.
So, okay, so now let's get the other slide back up. That was such good information. And you know, I think when we were on with Uchi not too long ago, he said exercise 7 minutes a day. And so I have been following that protocol, and it's made a big difference, because you can get so sucked into this computer or this work or these emails or these telephones. It's crazy. So I'm super excited that you also agree, you know, an hour of news is enough. And if I even get that much. So again, we want to thank you for attending the webinar today. Benko, practice coaching at benko.com, practice coaching at benko.com. If you have any questions, if you want to give us some feedback, we want to hear from you. Like, what do you want to hear about? Let us know. I know this one was really highly requested. So this one will also be going out in a recording so that, you know, we'll be able to help more people. But please give us some feedback. Text us, email us and let us know how you're doing. Our upcoming webinar, I'm super excited. We talked a lot about this. We talked about telephone skills and like what you should be saying when that phone rings. And I can't think of anybody else. And Kelly, I know you and Steve agree with me. Catherine Belt is going to be phenomenal. So she's going to be really giving us some tips about what you should be saying on your phone calls, what you should be talking about with your team members, and how, you know, they should be, responding to your patients. So I'm really excited about that. And if you hover over right now, if you take your cell phones and you hover over that little, what is that called? What is that?
QR code.
QR code.
Okay. Hover over that, it'll automatically take you in there and let you get registered. So that's something easy to do, or you can go on the link below and sign up. But that one's going to be a great webinar, and that's coming up on Thursday, April the 16th at 1 o'clock Eastern time.
Catherine is absolutely brilliant.
Absolutely.
So again, your CEs are going to take about 30 days. Just be patient. We will be getting those out to you. They will be coming via your email that you registered on. So, and you will also see a survey at the end of those. We really want your feedback. Let us know how we're doing. So please make sure you fill those out. I hope Steve and Kelly, we can maybe share those with you today. So maybe you can actually figure out what courses you want to do for your clients also.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
This
Thank
is the
you.
last one. I'm super excited about this. So Kelly, hold your phone up. Steve, hold your phone up. You have to turn around and take a picture. Like, wait a second, I'm gonna turn it around. See of you on the phone with me. What, is it gonna work? So we're really excited. We want you to share your pictures of what you're doing, and we want to share them on Benko. We're gonna have to do some kind of contest, right, Kelly? Kelly's always creative like me.
Yes.
So this will be fun, right, Kelly?
We want to see your best pictures. We want to see what you guys are doing with this blessing of time that we all have in our lives now. We all complained a couple of months ago we didn't have any time. Now we have it. So show us what you're doing with your time.
So please.
We know a lot of our clients are on this webinar as well. So send them to Kelly and I, and we'll forward them to Kay.
Tag them at Benko. Put them on your social media and tag at Benko Dental.
So how does that work, Kelly? They have to do that. They have to take their picture. Tell me how to do it.
Yep. Take a picture. Show us something fun that you're doing with your time. Show us what you're doing to build your practice and keep your team inspired, keep your patients inspired. Post it on whatever social media you like. And then in the comments, tag at Benko Dental, just like you see on the screen right now. And then we will see it and we'll repost it on our Smile Potential page, and we'll comment. We'll let you know who we think is having the most fun and making the best use of this time, and we'll give you a fun prize, right, Kay? We'll figure that out.
We'll have to do something. We'll do some kind of contest. And I also challenge my Benko family to be a part of this. So please make it sure. I think our Facebook people are going to absolutely love this. So we should have been doing this all along. I don't know why I waited. But when you talk about laughter, maybe we'll get some fun laughter out of this, right?
That's right.
I only imagine kids climbing all over you and you're trying to work on your computer, or dogs sitting in your lap. I can already kind of visualize what it's going to look like. This has been one of my favorite panels. So thank you so much, Kelly and Steve. You know how much I love you. Dr. Gurr, you did an amazing job. And I know that this is an issue that I know Chuck's been talking about. So we're super excited about that. Again, guys, if you want, we want to hear from you. We want to know what your questions are, what your feedback is. We want to, Kelly and Steve, I hope you guys can come back. Dr. Gurr, I'm sure I would love to bring you back as we start going back into our practices and getting ready. So thank you guys for all joining us, and we will see you soon.
Thank you, everyone. Make it a great day.
Thanks, Dr. Gurr.